She called me the dropout in front of 40 people, and she smiled when she said it. That smile, easy, practiced, like she'd been waiting for the right audience, was the last thing she'd ever feel comfortable doing around me. My brother's 60th birthday party for our dad wasn't supposed to go this way. I'd driven 4 hours from Vancouver to our hometown of Kelowna, taken Friday off work, which for me means canceling 3 meetings and rescheduling a call with our Edmonton supplier, and I'd shown up with a bottle of Okanagan Red that cost more than most people's grocery run. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. Dad loves local wine. That's it. That was the whole thought. My sister-in-law, Renata, had planned the evening at Harvest Table, which is a restaurant in the South End that does these long farm-to-table dinners where everything arrives slowly and costs a lot, and the lighting is soft enough to make anyone look kinder than they are. I noticed, when I walked in, that the hostess didn't check my name against the list the way she did with the others. She just looked at me, jeans, blazer, hair down, and hesitated. Then she looked past me to see if someone more expected was coming through the door behind me. I know that look. I've been getting it my whole life. My brother spotted me from across the room and waved. He looked good, 42 now, a little gray at the temples, the kind of man who fills out a sport coat the way our dad used to. He was standing with Renata, and when I reached them, she looked at my outfit in that way some women do, starting at your shoes and ending at your face like she was grading a submission. "You drove all the way from Vancouver," she said, not a question, more like an observation she found mildly inconvenient. "Wouldn't miss it?" I said. She smiled. "Of course. That was the first 10 minutes. I found my dad near the window, talking to my uncle. Dad pulled me into a hug that lasted long enough to embarrass me a little, and I let it, because he smells exactly the same as he did when I was 9. Cedar and something warm, like sawdust, and sometimes you just need a second inside that before the rest of the evening starts." "My girl," he said, holding my face in both his hands. "Happy birthday, Dad." He introduced me to a few people I didn't know, friends of my brother's, colleagues of Renata's, a couple from their neighborhood. Everyone asked pleasant. I said I ran a logistic company. Most people nodded and moved on, the way people do when an answer doesn't give them anything to push against. Renata's mother, a woman named Gisele who was wearing an expensive pearl necklace and the posture of someone who had never once been told no, found her way to me around the time the first course arrived. "So you're the younger one," she said. "The one who didn't finish school." "I left after second year," I said. She tilted her head. "And that worked out for you?" "It did, yeah." She made a sound in her throat, not quite dismissive, not quite polite, and turned back to her salmon. "I grew up understanding that I was a disappointment in a specific, particular way, not to my dad. Dad always said I had a mind for systems, for seeing how things connected, and that no classroom had ever taught that. But to everyone else in a certain orbit around our family, I was the one who'd left UBC after 2 years to help run a small freight operation out of a garage in Burnaby with a man I'd met at a trade conference. Within 18 months, we'd incorporated. Within 4 years, I'd bought him out. Within 6, I had 14 employees, contracts with 4 national retailers, and a warehouse in the facility in Langley that I was in the process of expanding. Nobody in Kelowna knew any of that. It wasn't strategic silence, not at first. I got tired years ago of explaining myself to people who'd already decided what I was. And then it became easier not to. And then my brother, who I love, who I have always loved, even when he didn't know how to love me back properly, started getting credit for things I was quietly doing. The loan that kept my parents' mortgage from going into arrears in 2019, everyone thought that was him. The new roof on their house, him again. The trips, the little gifts that appeared, the account I set up so my mom would never have to worry about prescriptions. All of him, in the family's versions of the story. I never corrected anyone. That's the part I'd have to explain to a stranger, and I'm not sure it would land right. I didn't correct anyone because I didn't want them to know. Not because I was setting a trap, because being invisible felt safer than being seen for the wrong reasons. Renata found me again just before the main course, She had two of her friends with her. I'd caught their names earlier, Pascal and a woman everyone called Bryn, and they had that loose, champagne-easy warmth of people who are very comfortable in the room they're standing in. We were just talking about the restaurant, Renata said, gesturing around. Isn't it gorgeous? It's practically impossible to get a table here on weekends. My husband had to call in a favor. It's beautiful, I said. Because it is. I've always thought so. It's funny, she continued, because I was thinking about you, actually. I heard you work in, what is it? Shipping. Logistics. Yeah, right. She laughed lightly. Like the word itself was a little amusing. I just think it must be so hard not having finished your degree. Especially now with the economy. My brother's girlfriend is going through the same thing. She left school, and now she can't seem to get past a certain level, you know? There's a ceiling. Pascal nodded. Bryn made a sympathetic sound. I looked at Renata. I thought about the 17 people currently on my payroll. I thought about the email I'd answered that morning in my car in the Harvest Table parking lot from our new client in Manitoba, a grocery chain that had just signed a 3-year contract worth more than this restaurant makes in a year. I've managed to get by, I said. Renata smiled. Of course you have. You're resilient. That's admirable. She said it the way people say it when they mean the opposite. It was around that moment that something shifted in me. Not anger, exactly. Something quieter. More like watching a clock tick towards something you already knew was coming. The dinner continued. My dad gave a short speech that made my mom cry. My brother toasted him in a way that was genuinely funny and warm. I watched Renata across the table, the way she managed the room, refilling glasses, touching shoulders, laughing at exactly the right moments, and I thought, she's very good at this. She just doesn't know who's in the room. After dessert, Renata's father stood to say a few words. He was a large man with a voice that expected to be heard, and he talked about family and legacy and the importance of having a solid foundation, a career, a home, an education. He looked at my brother when he said these things. He did not look at me. Then he mentioned, almost in passing, that he and Gisele had just been through something difficult, a business investment that had soured badly. He didn't give details, but his voice went thin for a moment. His jaw tightened. Renata touched his arm. I didn't react. I filed it away. After the speeches, people broke into smaller conversations. I stepped outside onto the patio because the evening was one of those October nights in the Okanagan that still holds some warmth at the edges, and I wanted air. My brother came out a few minutes later. Hey, he said. Hey, he stood beside me, looking at the dark outline of the hills. You okay? I'm good. He was quiet for a moment, then, Renata? Means well. She doesn't always read the room. I looked at him. It's fine. She said something to you. It doesn't matter. He ran a hand through his hair. I know you think we don't, that we don't see you. What you do? I know you think. I don't think anything, I said. I just drove 4 hours for Dad's birthday. He nodded. Then, very quietly, I know about the roof. I didn't say anything. I found the invoice, he said, in Dad's files. When I was helping him with his taxes in April. Same company that did the driveway. I did the math. The mortgage thing, too. I looked at the hills again. You never said anything, he said. No. Why? I thought about it. The real answer, the true one, is that I learned early that money changes things in a family before it helps. That I'd watched cousins stop talking to each other over estates and loans. That I'd decided at 26 that I would rather be the quiet one who just handled things than the one everyone suddenly needed something from. Because I didn't want it to be a thing, I said. He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Then he put his arm around my shoulder briefly, the way we used to when we were kids. You should have told me, maybe. We went back inside. The evening had been winding down for about 20 minutes when Renata's father, whose name was Luis, sought me out. He found me near the bar, where I was having a last glass of water before the drive to my parents' house. Your brother tells me you're in logistics. He said, that's right. What kind of operation? I told him, briefly. Freight coordination, national contracts, the Langley facility. He nodded, but I could see him recalibrating something. Private? Fully. Any interest in investors? And there it was, the thing his voice had gone thin about during the speech. The soured investment, the tightened jaw. I set my glass down carefully. That depends on the opportunity. I've got a development project, he said. Commercial real estate, Alberta. The numbers are strong, but we're looking for a bridge. Someone who can move fast and isn't scared of a short-term risk. What kind of bridge are we talking? He named a number. It was significant, not impossible, but significant. I looked at him for a moment, then I said evenly, I'd need to see the full proposal. Financials, timeline, exit structure. His face did something, a small calculation, a mild surprise at the language coming from me. Of course, I can have my assistant send it over Monday. Sure, I said. Send it to the general inquiry address for ClearPath Logistics. I'll have my CFO take a look. He blinked. ClearPath Logistics. That's my company. He said nothing for a moment. Then, I've heard of ClearPath. Most people in the industry have, I said, not unkindly. He recovered quickly. You could see him doing it, pulling something back behind his face. Well, yes. Monday then. Monday, I said, and picked up my water glass. I don't know exactly when Renata came to understand what had happened. I think Louis told her before I left, because somewhere around 11 o'clock she appeared at my side with a different quality of attention than she'd had all evening. She was still warm, still polished, but there was something behind her eyes that hadn't been there at dinner, a kind of stillness, like a recalculation running. I didn't realize, she said, what you'd built. You didn't ask, I said. And then, because I didn't want to be cruel, because this wasn't about her, not really, it was never really about any of them, I added, it's easy to miss things about people when you think you already know the answer. She nodded slowly. I could see her deciding how to respond. I owe you an apology. You don't have to. No, she said. I was dismissive. I was unkind. And I'm sorry. It was the right thing to say. I believed she meant it, at least in the way that people mean things when the ground has just shifted under them. Thank you, I said, genuinely. My dad found me by the door when I was getting my coat. He pulled me into another hug. You okay? He said, same question as my brother, but different underneath. I'm really good, Dad. You seemed quiet tonight. I'm always quiet. He laughed. You're a lot of things. He held me at arm's length, looking at my face the way he's looked at my face my whole life. Like he's checking to make sure I'm still in there. I don't always say it right, but I know what you do. Not just the money stuff. I mean the way you show up, quietly, without needing anything back. My throat did the thing it does when I don't want it to. You don't have to be invisible to be safe, he said. I didn't have an answer for that. I just hugged him again. I drove back to my parents' place on the dark highway, windows cracked despite the October chill, because I needed the cold air to think. My phone sat in the cup holder. I had 3 unread messages, 2 from my operations manager about a route change in Saskatchewan, 1 from a friend asking how the party went. I didn't answer any of them. I thought about Louis and what he'd find when he looked up ClearPath on Monday. I thought about Renata and what it costs a person to apologize in real time when the math changes. I thought about my brothers standing on the patio with his hands in his pockets, saying, I know about the roof, and how small and enormous that sentence was at the same time. I thought about what my dad said, about not having to be invisible to be safe. I'm still working on that one. But here's what I know. I built something real. I built it in the years when nobody was watching, when nobody expected it, when the people in that dining room tonight had already written the end of my story and moved on. I built it quietly with my head down, learning things that don't have a classroom and making mistakes that cost real money and getting up the next morning anyway, and I didn't need them to see it. But I have to be honest, something shifted in me tonight that I wasn't entirely expecting. Not when Louis asked me about investors, not when Renata apologized. It happened earlier, on the patio with my brother when he said the thing about the roof. Because the truth is, I didn't keep quiet to be strategic. I kept quiet because I was afraid. Afraid that if they knew, they would love me differently. That they would love my balance sheet instead of me. That I would become a function rather than a person, And the thing I understood, driving home through the dark on the highway between Harvest Table and my parents' house, is that the fear was costing me more than the silence was protecting me. So here's what I'm going to do differently. I'm going to let my brother know me, actually know me, not just what I do, but why I do it. I'm going to let my dad come see the Langley facility, which he's asked about twice, and I've deflected twice because I didn't want to make it a big thing. I'm going to stop making myself small in rooms where I've earned the right to take up space. I'm not going to become someone who announces herself. That's not who I am, and it never will be. But there's a difference between being quiet because you're watching and being quiet because you're hiding. And I've been doing the second one for too long. Louis sent the proposal on Tuesday, not Monday. I looked it over with my CFO on Wednesday morning. The numbers had some gaps. We sent back a list of questions. I don't know if we'll invest. That's not the point. The point is that I walked into a room where I was already being erased and I stayed. I stayed for my dad, and I said what needed to be said when it needed to be said, and I drove home on a dark highway and let the cold air in and thought about the difference between being seen and being known. The morning after the party, I called my dad before he was fully awake. He picked up on the second ring anyway, because he always has. I wanted to ask about the facility, I said. If you'd want to come see it sometime. There was a pause, then I thought you'd never ask.